To the teacher endowed, transcendent destroyer, one thus gone, foe destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one gone to bliss, nor the world's supreme guide of beings to be tamed. Teacher of gods and humans to you, the Buddha endowed, transcendent destroyer, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings and go for refuge. When, O supreme among humans, you are born on this earth, you pay 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you, who are wise, then I bow. With pure bodies, form supremely fine, wisdom motion like a golden mountain. Fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner, the best supreme guide, to you I bow. With the supreme signs, face like the spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not incomparable, wise one, to you I bow. Great, compassionate, protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, to the Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms, unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path to freedom too, well established in the trainings, the holy field endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all-seeing, subdue the foe of false, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, 4 lands, sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you. May all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam Guru Randa Mandalakam Niryatayami. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
Okay, so I know you generated a bodhicitta motivation earlier this morning, but it's always good to remember that, refresh that, and also especially today because it's the full moon day and we're going to start our Varsha winter monastic retreat today, and soon we'll be starting the winter retreat. So it's good to really generate a strong sense of compassion and altruism as to why we're doing all these things. So I know many are still feeling tired. It's been a busy year, especially recently. We've done a lot, and some people are also experiencing illness, injuries, health issues. But we can re-energize ourselves, re-enthuse ourselves by thinking about how fortunate we are. We have a human life, and a precious human life, with all the resources we need to live comfortably. But most importantly, we have access to the Dharma. We have all learned the Dharma, met spiritual teachers who've inspired us. We've had a chance to learn, to study, to practice. So this is really the most precious thing. And it's also very rare among sentient beings throughout samsara, but even among human beings. There's so many human beings who don't have these opportunities that we have. And if, when we become tired, even exhausted from all the things we're doing here at the Abbey, at least it's good tiredness. We're doing virtuous things, not unwholesome, non-virtuous things. You know, there's a lot of people in the world who work really hard too, and some of the things they're doing are negative or non-virtuous, like people working in the slaughterhouses, people working in the fishing industry, people working as exterminators, or building weapons, producing and selling weapons, or in the military, using those weapons, causing death and suffering to others. And even farmers who are growing the crops that we need to survive, but in the process of doing that, lots of little creatures are killed. So they become tired, exhausted, worn out from the work that they do, but much of the work they do is creating negative karma, which will bring suffering in the future and keep them longer in samsara. But the things that we're doing that can become exhausting are virtuous. They're beneficial to others right now. All the work the Abbey is doing is helping so many people, so many sentient beings. We're also benefiting ourselves. We're creating good karma, virtue. Virtue is like wealth, like spiritual wealth, spiritual money. It's the source of all kinds of good things that we will experience in the future. In this life, in future lives, and so on, all the way up to enlightenment. So, understanding that our tiredness is related to virtue, actions that are beneficial for ourselves and for others can help us. At least keep our mind positive, even if our body is tired. And it's also helpful to remember impermanence. Usually tiredness goes away. It doesn't last forever and ever and ever. We just take rest when we need to, restore our energy, and eventually we'll be back to a state of having a lot of energy for practice. So let's connect our bodhicitta motivation with what we're doing here, listening to these teachings on the Lamrim, the stages of the path to enlightenment, so that it will become the cause for our own enlightenment and then eventually the enlightenment of all sentient beings. So today we will start on chapter 20, page 287. So here we start looking at the actual practice of shamatha, also translated in English as calm abiding or serenity. And the last chapter we went through, chapter 19, had some difficult material we went through last week. But just keep in mind, the main points in that chapter were, first of all, cultivating shamatha and special insight is the cause of many benefits. So there's a lot of benefit from cultivating those two states of mind. And then secondly, we need to cultivate both. So maybe you remember what happens if you only have shamatha, but you don't have special insight.
We may develop strong concentration, but we can't eradicate the obscurations.
Yeah. So without insight, special insight, we can't get out of samsara. We can't overcome the things that keep us trapped in samsara and prevent our attainment of liberation and enlightenment. So we just keep circling in samsara. And what happens if you have insight without shamatha? Well, you wouldn't have insight, but some understanding of emptiness. You might have, even a really good understanding of emptiness. But if you don't have shamatha, then what happens?
Well, your mind is easily still distracted. So you may have this understanding, but your mind just goes elsewhere.
Right, so... You can't actually attain insight without shamatha. You can have a good understanding of emptiness, but without shamatha, your mind is going to be unsteady, like the candle in the wind. And so you won't be able to have that penetrative mind that can look into whatever object you're analyzing and see how it is empty of inherent existence. So we need really strong concentration to do that. So we need both shamatha and insight to attain the highest goals of the path, liberation and enlightenment. And then another point in that chapter was the order of those two, that for first timers, when we're first generating these states of mind, shamatha has to be cultivated first, and then special insight on top of that. Although you can have, quite a degree of understanding of emptiness, even an inferential realization of emptiness, without having shamatha. But to go further than that and get eventually the direct realization of emptiness that eliminates the afflictions and the obscurations, then shamatha is essential. And in the context of the Lamrim, and also the Buddhist path in general, we cultivate these two qualities with respect to emptiness, selflessness, the true nature of things as the object. But it is also possible to cultivate shamatha and special insight with other objects. In fact, just about anything could be used. So in the Buddha's life, before he reached enlightenment, he studied with two teachers. I don't remember their names. Anyway. That's okay. Thank you. Okay, so they were meditative teachers, meditation masters, and they had cultivated. I think they both cultivated the formless absorptions. So that means they had shamatha and special insight, but with respect to the mundane path, contemplating the grossness of a lower level and the peacefulness of a higher level. So just with that as the object, they cultivated calm abiding and special insight. But, the most that can get you is a good rebirth up in the form or the formless realms, but not out of samsara. So when the Buddha studied with them, he learned their meditative techniques. He mastered them, like really quickly. He got it. But then he realized, no, the afflictions weren't gone. He still had attachment, still had desire, craving in his mind. So he realized he needed more. So he said, thank you, goodbye, and went off and found his own path. What we really need to do with these two states of mind is focus them on emptiness, selflessness, the true nature of things, and that's what will enable us to get free. Okay, so there's a lot of outlines coming up. So I've made slides of them. So on page 288, this is the last, 286, point number 6. This is the sixth and final point in chapter 19, under the heading of how to train in the last two perfections in general. So point number 6 is how to train in each of them individually. And that has 3 points: how to train in shamatha, so that'll take us a while to get through. Then how to train in special insight, that will come later. Then how they are united. Okay, so then how to train in shamatha. Okay, this is covering 2 chapters. And it has 3 main points, but a whole bunch of subpoints. I know some people, get agitated by all these points, all these outlines. I really like it. I find it very helpful to just sort of organize the material. Because otherwise, if you just had running paragraphs, with no headings, no divisions, it'd be kind of hard to figure out where you are. So it kind of helps you to see where you are. Okay, so page 287, the practice of shamatha. How to train in shamatha. This has 3 points. First, attending to the prerequisites of shamatha, and then how to cultivate shamatha in reliance upon them, and then the measure for the accomplishment of shamatha through meditation. First, attending to the prerequisites of shamatha. This has 6 points. I didn't make an outline for those because they're right in the book. So you probably heard a lot of this material already when you went through Volume 4 with Venerable Children. And if there's something you learned there, because it's been a while since I read Volume 4, if there's something you learned there that's different from what's mentioned here, then, bring that up. Okay, so there's 6 points for the prerequisites. First is staying in a favorable location. 2, having few desires. 3, contentment. 4, completely abandoning one's many activities. 5, pure ethics. And 6, completely eliminating one's conceptualization of desire. Okay, then as regards staying in a favorable location, the 5 excellent qualities of a location are first, good access, in that food, clothing, and so forth can be easily obtained. You know, you're not like hundreds of miles away from a town where you can get food and so on. That would make it a little hard. 2, a good sight, in that predators and other wild beasts, as well as enemies and the like, do not live there. We have a few wild beasts around, but so far nobody's gotten hurt by them. Maybe the devas are around protecting us. But yeah, I mean, try to imagine doing shamatha in a place where there's people fighting, shooting each other, killing each other. That would be hard to have a settled mind, a peaceful mind. And 3, good ground, in that it does not produce diseases. And then 4, good company, in that one has companions of equal ethics and views. So we definitely have that. So really fortunate to be with like-minded people who are dedicated to keeping ethics, keeping precepts, learning the Buddhist teachings, practicing them, and so on. So that would be difficult if you were with people who had other points of view or living a different lifestyle, maybe even killing insects and so on. So that would make it hard to keep your mind peaceful. And then 5, good attributes, in that during the day there are few people around, and at night there is little noise. And I think we have that too, at least especially in the winter. Okay, ornament for the Mahayana Sutras by Maitreya says, locations for wise people's attainments have good access, good sight, and good ground, as well as good companions and conveniences for yoga. Yoga here doesn't mean like physical yoga, hatha yoga, but mental yoga, yoking the mind to what is virtuous, what is beneficial. So that's the first of the 6 prerequisites. It's about the location. So I think, we can tick that off. We've got that. And then the second of the 6 points is having few desires. So there we may need to work a bit. So having few desires means not being excessively attached to good or numerous robes and so forth. So that one and the next one, contentment, which means always being content with merely adequate robes and the like, those are kind of similar. They're very similar. And I remembered, when we studied Abbey Dharma Kosha in the master's program, there's an explanation in there about the difference between them that I found helpful. So it seems that the difference between those is whether we already have something or not. So, for example, you already have, let's say, a jacket, a nice warm jacket, but maybe you're not satisfied with it and you want a better one, okay? So that's the meaning of desire, having a lot of desires, being dissatisfied with what you have, wanting more, wanting better. And so this is, I think, easy to see how it disturbs your mind and prevents calm abiding. If you're, during your meditation, you keep having these thoughts, you notice somebody else's nice jacket or somebody else's, nice new iPad. You feel dissatisfied with the one you have, and you start thinking, how can I get one like that? So that's something we need to overcome and reduce our desires so we don't have that kind of thought coming up, or fewer desires. And then on the other hand, if there are things you don't have but want to have, like maybe chocolate or coffee or I don't know, something, certain types of clothes, you don't already have that, but you want it. Okay, so that's a lack of contentment. That's discontent, being dissatisfied. And so again, that leads to a lot of distractions during meditation, thinking about how to get those things that you want, even though maybe you don't really need them. So we need both of those. We need to have few desires, and contentment, being content with adequate robes and the like. But I think, it needs to be within reason. Like if your snow boots are full of holes and they're falling apart and the snow's getting in, maybe it's time to get a new pair. And then the next one, number 4, is completely abandoning one's many activities, is to completely abandon inferior activities such as business, excessive socializing with lay or ordained people, one's medical practice, astrological calculations, and so forth. So these are non-dharma things, so activities that aren't dharma. We should stop doing those, because again, if you're involved in those in between your meditation sessions, then during your sessions, your mind's going to be thinking about the ones you just did and planning the next ones. So it makes it hard to concentrate. And I think even with dharma activities, we also have to be careful and not be excessively involved in those, because again, that can lead to distractions during meditation. So that's why here during the winter retreat, we really try our best to cut down or eliminate completely internet, email, news, and so on. And we don't go out as much as possible unless it's some emergency. And then point 5 is pure ethics. So this means with regard to pratimoksha and bodhisattva vows, not damaging the basis of the trainings through natural or prescribed misdeeds. And even if it is damaged, only owing to carelessness, it is quickly restored through regret in accordance with the Dharma. So what's an example of a natural misdeed? Killing. So any action that is always negative, no matter who does it. Well, with maybe exceptions, like a high-level bodhisattva, like that ship captain, previous life of the Buddha. But for most ordinary beings, sentient beings, killing is a non-virtuous action for anybody, whether you have precepts or not. So some of our precepts are related to those kind of actions, naturally non-virtuous. And then prescribed, what would be an example of a prescribed misdeed? Eating afternoon, right? So there's nothing naturally non-virtuous about that. But for those of us who have a precept to not eat afternoon, then that is a prescribed misdeed. But there are exceptions to that, like if you're ill, if you need it for your health, for your meditation practice. That's why we have medicine meal. Medicine. It's seen as medicine and not as food. And then, if we do commit any misdeed, then we use purification practice to purify that and restore precepts, like we're going to do this afternoon. Number 6 is completely eliminating one's conceptualization of desire and the like. Means you eliminate all conceptualization of desire by meditating on its faults in this life, such as getting killed or arrested, and in future lives, such as birth in the lower realms. Or you should meditate thinking all the pleasant and unpleasant things of cyclic existence are impermanent and subject to destruction, as I will definitely be separated from all of them before long. Why do I get overly attached? And so on. So I think of all the afflictions, desire is probably the main one that distracts our mind. We get distracted during meditation. Most of the time it's because of desire. Sometimes it's aversion, irritation, or other afflictions. But I don't know, if you look at where your mind goes when you get distracted, it's usually related to desire. So we really have to work on that one in particular. And he gives advice here on how to do that. Like even in this life, desire can lead to problems, getting arrested or killed. And then in future lives, it can lead to lower rebirths. And even if it doesn't lead to that, it just keeps us stuck in samsara, even in upper rebirths. But as long as we have desire, craving in our mind, then we can't get out of samsara, much less reach enlightenment. So we need to look out for that one and work on overcoming it. Then Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment by Atisha says, even if you put in great effort for 1,000 years, concentration will not be accomplished if the limbs of shamatha are impaired. For those with a heartfelt desire to accomplish the concentration of shamatha and special insight, it is therefore essential to put effort into the 13 prerequisites and the like set forth in Shravaka levels. So Shravaka levels is a text by a Sangha, and there is a footnote if you want to know what these 13 are. The chief prerequisites, familiarity with the teaching and an inner discipline, so knowing the Dharma and ethical conduct, that's the first one. Second, excellence of one's own aims. Third, excellence of others' aims. 4, desire for the teaching. 5, renunciation. 6, vows of ethical discipline. 7, restraint of the senses. 8, moderation in eating. 9, the practice of wakefulness. So not overeating, not oversleeping. 10, dwelling vigilantly. 11, solitude. 12, cleansing of obscurations. And 13, proper basis of concentration. There's no explanation of these here, but probably a lot of these are self-explanatory. Maybe one day that text will be translated and then we get some commentary to it. But anyway, it's said that the 6 prerequisites that we just went through summarize those 13. So those are the main ones. So just getting those 6 prerequisites, is kind of takes some effort to work, especially on desire, working on our desire, our attachments, learning to be content. So how can we do that? How can we learn to be content? What are some ways? Venerable Jigme.
I think the first thing is to recognize when you have desire running in the mind, and so pay attention to, where your attention is going, and then slow down so that you can make a wise decision about what your activity is going to be next. I think that's the best one that I use, anyhow.
Anyone else?
Meditating on the faults of attachment and desire and the advantages of eradicating it.
Meditating on impermanence, like you were mentioning earlier, seeing that these things are not going to bring lasting happiness.
Cultivating gratitude and appreciation for what we do have.
Also reflecting on the disadvantages or the negative qualities of the object of desire itself, which for me, I have to catch it before I get there, but it is a good
It's
one once my mind catches it, right?
It's not that great.
That chocolate, what is that chocolate going to do to me after I have this satisfaction, right?
Yeah, very impermanent. I also find it helpful to contemplate other people who have less, and feel, it's like Venerable Noan said, gratitude for what we do have. So I think our human mind is kind of by nature likes to compare. Yeah, so you see somebody who has more and better, and then you want that. But using that same mind, looking the other way, looking at those who have less, and then you can realize, wow, I'm really, really fortunate with what I do have. And this robe, even though it's got lots of patches on it, it's full of holes, it's very old, I've been wearing it for 30 years, but it's still okay. This robe, it's been 30 years. Now it's got bleach marks. Sravasti, Abbey, dishwashing bleach marks. I wear it proudly. But it's still okay. Okay, next is how to cultivate shamatha and reliance upon them. So then we have a whole bunch more outlines. So this has 2 points, the preparation and the actual practice. So for the preparation, it says, you should long cultivate the 6 preparatory practices explained above, as well as bodhicitta, and as part of that, also train in the core meditation topics shared with persons of lesser and medium capacity. So that means we have to go right back to the beginning of the book and start all over again. Anyone know those 6 preparatory practices by heart? Cleaning. Don't you sit down. Sit down. Sit down in the right posture. Yeah, if you can. Then I think it's taking refuge. 4, 5. They're in the blue prayer book if anyone has that. Taking refuge, I think generating bodhicitta as well. And then 7-limb prayer. Yeah, 7 limbs and mandala. Making requests. That sounds good. Yeah. So anyway, those practices are preparatory for meditation because they get us into a good state of mind and accumulate a certain amount of virtue. Did we miss any of them, Venerable? Making offerings. Yeah, visualize merit fields. Yeah, some of them are sort of combined into one. So visualizing the merit field, making offerings, 7 limbs, requests. Okay, so these are preparatory for meditation to put our mind into the ideal state before we do meditation. And you can do them in a very long and elaborate way, but you can also do them in an abbreviated way. So I was reading something last night that, like your first session of the day, it's good to do them in a more elaborate way, and then in the other sessions you can do them in an abbreviated way. And also bodhicitta. So we also need to cultivate bodhicitta. So why do you think that is? Why do we need? And he says here, long cultivate. So work on these for a long time. So what do you think would happen if we didn't do this? If we didn't really work on cultivating the 6 preparatory practices and bodhicitta? What disadvantages would there be? I don't know, Semkye.
Everything in the Dharma, there's a sequence to get the mind more and more focused, more and more stable. So if we didn't have any type of parameters to be able to get ourselves into a state of mind that would be ready to practice, and then if bodhicitta wasn't there, I could see myself just getting self-absorbed in doing this all for my own well-being and for my own liberation, without expanding it on why I'm going through all of this, so that I can be of benefit to us sentient beings, and to be able to have the mind that can get that focus, get that stable for the long-term goal of needing that kind of mind. That's, that's nourished and fueled and fed by all good things.
Yeah, I was in a teaching once with a Lama, Geshe, and the question came up, like this teaching on developing concentration. Why is it taught here and not earlier, like in the middle scope? In the middle stages of the path. That's where you have the 3 higher trainings: ethics, concentration, wisdom. And there is a lot of explanation about ethics, but not concentration and wisdom, which you'd think, it should be taught there. And he said it's because, those of us who aim for enlightenment, we're following the Mahayana path, we need to make sure our motivation for cultivating shamatha is bodhicitta, that we're doing it for others and not just for ourselves. Otherwise, if we start working on shamatha at that point, when we're still on the middle stages, we could get distracted by the bliss. You can get a lot of bliss from concentration and then go off in that direction and forget about sentient beings. So something like that. I don't remember the exact words, but that was, that was helpful to make sure that, our motivation for practicing, developing concentration is the Mahayana motivation, bodhicitta motivation, working for the benefit of all sentient beings. And I can imagine there's a lot of people, like nowadays, who are cultivating shamatha, maybe just for this life. Because it seems to be quite popular. You hear a lot of people talking about attaining jhanas, and there's a lot of Western people who don't even believe in future lives. So why do they want to attain the jhanas? Huh? Just bliss here and now. Well, they probably can see that if your mind is under the control of afflictions, then you're harming others. So there's probably a certain amount of concern for others, not wanting to harm them. wanting to help them instead. But yeah, if you're only thinking in terms of this lifetime, then that's not even the proper Dharma motivation. Better than not doing it at all, but still, we just have to make sure our motivation is in accordance with the Mahayana path. And okay, so we need to really have good, firm understanding and experience of the Lamrim, 6 preparatory practices, and then the meditations of the 3 scopes, 3 levels. Okay, now we come to the actual practice. So the actual practice has 2 points, the physical posture for meditation, and then explanation of the stages of meditation. So the physical posture for meditation, according to stages of meditation, you should sit on a very soft and comfortable seat. That sounds kind of cushy, doesn't it? Maybe not good to be too soft. I should fall asleep. But I guess the point is not too hard. I find if I sit on a hard surface, then I get pins and needles. And so it needs to be soft enough that doesn't happen. And adopt a physical posture with the following 8. Here it has 8 characteristics. First, the legs may be fully crossed or half crossed. The eyes are directed over the tip of the nose, neither too open nor too closed. I'm glad they say it here, because the way it's said here, because sometimes they say it should be directed at the tip of the nose, which sounds like you're supposed to cross your eyes. That's so confusing in some of the traditional texts. So I think it's more that kind of they're directed along the line of the nose, like downwards in that direction. Neither too open nor too closed. If they're too open, we can get distracted by things we see. If they're too closed, what happens? Right. And then you should sit with your body straight and erect rather than too bent or crooked, and with your mindfulness placed inward. Your shoulders should be straight and even, not like that. The head is held not too high nor too low. I say if it's too high, that can increase excitement, and too low can lead to sinking, dullness, sleepiness, and without tilting to one side, but straight. And you should keep yourself erect from the nose down to the navel. If you want to check that, I think they say you can take a string and hold it on your nose and it should reach your navel. I've never tried that, but there is a way of doing that. And then the teeth and lips should remain natural, just as they are, not clenched. The tongue should be placed near the upper teeth, on the upper palate. So those are the 7 points. And then the 8th, as for the breath, your exhalations and inhalations should not be audible, forceful, or uncontrolled. So ideally, you shouldn't be breathing so loud that other people around you can hear. That happens sometimes, right? And I find it really annoying. So it should be quiet and gentle. Not forceful or uncontrolled. But we have to be careful about that, because I often have people saying that when they pay attention to their breathing, they can see their mind is starting to control their breathing. They have a really hard time not controlling. I've never noticed that in myself, but maybe if you have a strong tendency to be a controlling person, control freak, then Yeah. So I think, just try to notice if that's happening. And if it is happening, try to let go. I just think you don't need to. Your body knows how to breathe. When we're unconscious, when we're asleep, our body continues to breathe. So there's no need to be involved in that and control it. Just let go of that. Try anyway. Then rather, their coming and going of the breath should by all means proceed imperceptibly, leisurely, and effortlessly. Thus, you should first accomplish the eightfold posture and especially gentle breathing as explained. But of course, as we know, if you can't sit like this, it is fine to sit in a chair. And I was listening once to a talk by Alan Wallace talking about shamatha. He has a lot of experience practicing it and teaching it. And he talked about one of his students who, I don't know what she had, but it was just so painful for her to sit, even in a chair, that she would lie down. She would do it lying down. That was the most comfortable position. And he said she was doing quite well. She was actually making progress. So you just have to stay awake. But if you learn how to do that, how to keep yourself awake, then if your body is really calm and comfortable, then your mind can just focus on your object. And I met another woman who said for her the only posture that was comfortable was standing up. Even sitting was painful. And any kind of sitting, even lying down. Yeah, so the only thing she could do was stand up. So, the Buddha did say, like in the sutra on the 4 establishments of mindfulness, that sitting, walking, lying down, and standing, all those 4 positions we should be practicing. And walking too, walking meditation. You can get very, very concentrated doing that. So I think people can feel free to experiment and find what position, what way of holding the body works best for them. Okay, now the main part, explanation of the stages of meditation. Okay, so first he says, most expositions of the stages of the path say that shamatha is accomplished by way of the 8 factors set forth in Distinguishing the Middle from the Extremes. That's another text by Maitreya, that eliminate the 5 faults. What are the 5 faults? No, those are the 5 hindrances. 5 faults. Laziness. Forgetfulness is the second one. Laziness, forgetfulness. That's number 4. Third one is laxity and excitement. Those are together in one. Those are the big ones. Then not applying antidotes when you should, and then over applying antidotes when you don't need them anymore. So those are the 5 faults. The instructions from Geshe Laksorwas, I never heard of him, but anyway, maybe one of the Kadampa masters. His lineage explained that on top of that, the 6 powers, the 4 attentions, and the 9 states of attentional development explained in Shravaka levels must be accomplished. In his ornament for the Mahayana Sutras and distinguishing the middle from the extremes, the Venerable Maitreya also sets forth the 9 states of attentional development for mental abiding and the 8 factors for eliminating the faults. So we'll come to all those later. Following them, Indian scholars such as Haribhadra, Kamalashila, and Shantipa also set forth many stages of accomplishing concentration. In the Mantrayana, Vajrayana, you also need to know them. Within the scriptures, the sutra collection in particular presents extensively the faults of concentration, such as the 5 faults and the way to eliminate them. So this is the way that samatha is explained in the Lamrim. And I often wondered why they don't mention the 5 hindrances, which are really emphasized in the Pali tradition, the Theravada tradition. And Venerable does include them in the volume 4, the 5 hindrances. And when I encountered those via the Theravada tradition, I thought, well, these are much more practical in a way. Like for us beginners, we need to really look out for sense desire, ill will. I mean, those are like much grosser kinds of obstacles to our concentration. And the 5 faults mentioned here kind of become more and more subtle. So I seem to recall asking one Geshe about this, and I couldn't find his answer on my computer, but I think, if I remember, he said something about the lineage, the transmission. And so like here, Lama Tsongkhapa mentions the text that he is using, and other Lamrim authors are using, texts by Maitreya, by Asanga, Kamalashila, and so on. So maybe he's just following those explanations. That's why he explains it in this way. Maybe those 5 hindrances aren't explained in those texts, but they do appear in the Lamrim. So I did find over on page 324 where it's talking about the signs of accomplishing shamatha, when you have actually accomplished shamatha, and these different things that happen, like you have attained the mind of a form realm and so on. And it says here, the 5 hindrances, aspiration for sensual pleasures, sleepiness, and so forth, have largely disappeared. So clearly Lama Tsongkhapa knows about these 5 hindrances, and this is one of the signs that you've accomplished shamatha, that they have been very much suppressed. And also in the Bodhisattva precepts, one of the secondary Bodhisattva precepts, number 25, which is related to the perfection of concentration, it says the precept is to not work on abandoning those 5 hindrances. So it's in our Bodhisattva precepts. We should be working on overcoming those. So I just find it very puzzling that, there's no explanation in the Lamrim texts for how to overcome those. So I'm really glad that Venerable did include them in volume 4. And still a puzzle to me. Okay, so here, so top of page 290. So this point has 2 parts. First, the way to generate flawless concentration. Second, the stages of shamatha that arise in reliance upon it. So the way to generate flawless concentration has 3 points. What to do before focusing the mind on the object, what to do while focusing the mind on the object, and what to do after focusing the mind on the object. Okay, so first, what to do before focusing the mind on the object. Here he talks about how to overcome the first of the 5 faults, which is, remember? Laziness. And so he says, if you cannot put an end to laziness, which delights not in cultivating concentration, but rather in the opposite, It will prevent you from engaging in concentration all along. And even if you achieve it once, it cannot possibly be durable and will therefore deteriorate quickly. For this reason, it is of great importance to put an end to laziness from the start. So we've learned about different kinds of laziness. What are the different kinds of laziness? Discouragement is one. Procrastination is one. Being, how is it called? What is it called? Yeah, kind of being busy or being attached to things that aren't really Dharma. Keeping yourself busy with kind of non-Dharma things or even negative things. There's different ways of explaining. Sometimes they just say the laziness of the laziness, which is like you like to sleep and lie around, do nothing. Yeah, so that's another. There's different explanations. But it said that in the context of shamatha, I've read it somewhere, the meaning of laziness is you just don't feel like meditating, right? I don't feel like it. I've done so much already. I've done enough. I don't want to do any more. So it's kind of resistance, aversion to sitting down and meditating. And I think that, probably most of us, when we first encounter meditation, we're really enthusiastic. Wow, this is cool. This is great. We have a lot of energy for meditation. And so that can happen when you're starting on a shamatha retreat, starting to work on shamatha. But are you able to maintain that? Yeah, that's what we need to do. Because to achieve shamatha, you've got to put in a lot of time on the cushion. Looking at the same object again and again and again, hour after hour, day after day. So, yeah, it can get boring. Yeah, we think retreat, retreat, so exciting, going off in the mountains and meditating like Milarepa. So that's very romantic, but the reality, I heard Tenzin Palmo talk, but Jetsunma Tenzin Palmo talk about this once, she was in retreat for 12 years. You're doing the same practice several times a day, day after day after day after day. No TV, no internet. No company, nobody to talk to, where she was. And it can get really boring. So you can imagine, sometimes feeling, oh no, another session. It's 9 o'clock. I have to go and sit and do another session. So that's laziness, this kind of laziness. This is the kind of laziness that is in the context of shamatha. Not being enthusiastic to meditate. Anyone ever feel that way? But it can happen it does not necessarily shamatha, it could be anything. Lamrim meditation, your deity practice, anything. I've done it so many times already. Again, I have to do it again? Okay, so how to get rid of that kind of laziness? So he says, now, if you achieve pliancy and your body and mind expand with bliss, you will not weary day or night in applying yourself to virtue, and laziness will thereby be stopped. So that is, that's the antidote. Yeah, just get pliancy, and then you won't have any more laziness. You'll be happy to meditate day and night. You won't even want to go for lunch. So pliancy. Well, I don't know. I haven't experienced it, but that's what they say. It just feels blissful in your body and your mind. You are so happy to sit there meditating. You're not interested in anything else. Okay. But to generate it, you must be able to continuously maintain joyous effort for concentration, the cause for generating pliancy. So that's how we get pliancy, is having joyous effort to keep practicing, working on your concentration. And how do we get that joyous effort? To generate that, you need the intense, sustained aspiration of striving for concentration. So we have to have the aspiration. We have to want to attain concentration, to have that joyous effort to work at it. And to engender that, you need the firm faith of captivation. Captivation? That's an interesting term. Maybe, I don't know. I didn't check the Tibetan or that. From seeing the excellent qualities of concentration. Therefore, you should cultivate that faith by repeatedly reflecting on the excellent qualities of concentration. So, so this is starting to talk about the first of the 5 faults, which is laziness, and the first 4 of the antidotes, the 8 antidotes. So the first 4 of those 8 antidotes are to overcome laziness. So they go in reverse order, but the order in which we actually do them is first faith. We have to have faith. And faith here isn't like faith in the Buddha or faith in our spiritual teacher. It's faith in concentration, faith in the good qualities of concentration. Meaning you've learned about, you've thought about, and you have a firm conviction. That's probably what he means here. A firm conviction that having concentration, having calm abiding is a good thing. It brings a lot of benefits. I want it. So that kind of faith will then lead to the second antidote, which is aspiration. I want to attain it. I aspire to attain it. And that will lead to joyous effort, where you're continuing to practice, working for it. And then eventually, you'll get pliancy. And I mean, they do say pliancy occurs, that's one of the signs of experiencing calm abiding. One of the signs that you've attained calm abiding or shamatha is when you have that pliancy. But I think it's in Genlam Rinpoche's book on shamatha. He did a lot of this practice. He said that it actually starts small. You start getting little bits of pliancy as your concentration grows. So it kind of reaches its full form when you've achieved shamatha, but you can also start to experience it along the way. So maybe some of you have had even just glimpses, flashes of just feeling really peaceful, calm in your body and in your mind, like you could just keep sitting there meditating. So that could be, the start of pliancy. So I think when that happens, you start getting these little glimpses or little flashes of pliancy. Then you have your own firsthand experience of the benefit of concentration, and you can see. I mean, I don't know. When people talk about, what is that term they use? The zone. I'm not sure. Runners, artists. People get into this state of mind. The flow. I thought the zone, isn't the zone? Okay, whatever you call it, you're just focused on what you're doing, and it sounds like it's just like you're really absorbed, and it really feels good, and you want to just keep doing it. It's probably not really shamatha, but it's some degree of concentration. I think we all experience it sometimes. I know when I'm writing, if I'm writing or editing, working on something I'm really enjoying, I just get really into it. It's like the time just flies. You hardly notice passing of time. So maybe that's a little bit like pliancy. I don't know. But anyway, they say once you have full-blown, fully developed pliancy, then no more laziness. You're finished with that kind of laziness. Okay, so he, now let's go on. Distinguishing the middle from the extreme says, the base is that which is based on it, the cause, the effect. Here, the basis is aspiration, which is the basis of effort, joyous effort. That which is based on it is effort or joyous effort. The cause of aspiration is the faith of conviction with regard to the excellent qualities, and the effect of effort is pliancy. So then he goes on to explain how to cultivate faith in calm abiding. So that's what we need first. The excellent qualities of the concentration to be cultivated here are as follows. Once concentration has been accomplished, mental happiness and physical comfort greatly increase so that you are always happy in this lifetime. Does that sound good? Can you imagine being always happy? Mind is always happy, never grouchy, grumpy, grumbly, depressed. And physical comfort as well. And then secondly, from acquiring physical and mental pliancy, the mind is fit to be placed on any virtuous object at will. So you can just, you got enough control over your mind that you can always keep it on something virtuous, in a virtuous, positive state of mind, which naturally brings happiness. Virtue is the source of happiness. So you can keep your mind away from these other thoughts and things that are not virtuous and that make you unhappy. So that would be great. Since uncontrolled distraction toward mistaken objects has subsided, you rarely commit faulty conduct, and whatever virtue you perform has great strength. So we'll almost never do anything non-virtuous. And the things we do that are virtuous will be very strong and pure. Next, in reliance upon samatha, you can achieve excellent qualities such as clairvoyance. You can fly in the sky, transform your body into deer and rabbits and office buildings and whatever, anything. But of course, it's only to benefit others, not to show off. Clairvoyance, miraculous powers, and in particular, the realization of special insight that realizes emptiness so that the root of cyclic existence can be cut quickly. So that's the real purpose of cultivating shamatha, is so that we can use it to focus on emptiness, the true nature of things, achieve special insight, and then the direct realization, and proceed up to enlightenment. If you contemplate any of these and other excellent qualities, the power of your enthusiasm for cultivating concentration will increase. You should get to know them and meditate on them. Once this has arisen, it will constantly compel you from within to cultivate concentration so that you will easily attain it. And since you engage in the meditation again and again, it will be very difficult for it to degenerate after you attain it. So it seems like it's possible, even if you attain calm abiding, shamatha, that it can degenerate. Actually, they say we've all attained it in past lives. Well, in past lives, we have attained calm abiding, and they say we've attained all those four form realm jhanas and the formless realm. We've been in all those places, so we've done it before, but obviously it degenerated. Something went wrong. We didn't keep it up. So yeah, we also have to be able to keep it up. So it's good to learn these by heart, write them, or at least write them down, have a note on your table, your puja table, just to remind yourself, this is why I'm sitting here meditating. These are all the benefits. So this will help maintain enthusiasm for calm abiding. Let's see. Oh, are we there yet? that clock is kind of hard to read. The second, from here, the second hand is sort of invisible. Maybe we need to put some paint on it. But anyway, there's this one. Any questions, or should I keep going?
Especially in light of our recent visitor, trying to explain a little bit the difference between why we do things and the Theravadins do different things. And one of the things that seemed to come to my mind is, and it was clear to me, is how developing bodhicitta is like front center with everything that we do. So the things that they might do in terms of sitting in long, trying to achieve great concentration, is way later in our practice.
Is what?
Is way later in our practice for a lot of us than it would be for a Theravada practitioner. Just even to explain that, to see how critical important it is for us to get that bodhicitta mind as we're going forward. So I don't know. Again, I always have this question about where in our practice does really focusing on shamatha become beneficial. And any thoughts you have on that, or anything from your experience, would be helpful to understand.
Yeah, I guess normally, in my experience, in our tradition, we are encouraged to learn the Lamrim and do a lot of purification practices, accumulation of merit, like the Ngundro practices, and then learn Lamrim, meditate on Lamrim, and do, mostly those things. And shamatha, it's not easy. It sounds glamorous, it sounds romantic, it sounds wonderful, but it's really hard. And if you're not familiar, I'll tell you a story. There was this retreat that was done at Cloud Mountain around 1990, I think. Alan Wallace, Genlam Rinpoche was there, Alan Wallace was there on shamatha with, a master in the, two masters actually, two very experienced practitioners with them. And I heard about it, but I was in Singapore and I couldn't go, but I thought, wow, that sounds great. And then some years later, I met a woman who had done that retreat. And she said that she realized early on that she wasn't ready. It was too high for her. She hadn't had enough exposure to the basic teachings. So she stayed in the retreat anyway. Genlam Rinpoche advised her to read the Lamrim, read Shantideva. So she read and meditated on those texts, and it was incredibly beneficial for her. But for me, that was just helpful to see that, that you do need to have a certain level of understanding and experience of the more basic teachings before you can do that. Otherwise, it's not going to work. You might even get discouraged. You might even think and wonder, what am I doing here? Once you run into obstacles, and run away. So I think, and I spent 6 months once trying to work on shamatha, and I realized how hard it is. I did a 6-month retreat on Lamrim first, and then I did 6 months of shamatha, and I think that was really good to do, but it was still very hard. Very hard. All kinds of stuff can come up that you didn't expect. And so if you don't have a really good, strong grounding in the basic teachings, then unless maybe from previous lives, I think, some people do seem to do really well from early on. And I think that might be because of past lives, that they had accomplished it in a not too distant past life, and they can just quickly get back into it. So we don't know what kind of karmic imprints we have, what kind of tendencies we have from the past. So they might ripen quickly. But if, like that woman, at least she had the, I don't know what word to say, but the conscientiousness to stay in the retreat. And fortunately, Genlam Rinpoche was there to guide her, and she still made had a valuable experience, a wonderful experience from it. But yeah, I mean, it's probably good to, also consult with your teacher. And if you have a really good, reliable teacher and they know you quite well, they could probably help you as well to know when would be the time. But that doesn't mean we don't try. I mean, it's always good to, even just 5 minutes before we do other meditations, to practice concentrating on the breath or whatever. So we can still work on it. And when we're doing analytical meditations, ideally, we're supposed to pause when we get some little experience and try to stay with that as long as we can. So in that way, we're familiarizing ourselves with concentration. But to, really go into retreat and say, I'm going to work on shamatha and focus on that, make that our priority, that's... I see it as advanced. But actually in the Lamrim, in the Tibetan tradition, I read in one of Alan Wallace's books, he said there's actually very few people who are working on shamatha, or at least in this way. Many of them will do it in the context of Vajrayana. They'll use Vajrayana practices, because you have to. If you want to get anywhere in Vajrayana, you have to have shamatha. So they'll do it in that context. But to just practice it the way it's explained here, he said not many people are doing it. And His Holiness has said, he said that's actually a shame. It's sad that is the case, and he gives encouragement to people to work on cultivating shamatha. I saw another hand back there. Some Venerable Tsechen.
Venerable, I'm a little confused about what the difference in application is between the 5 hindrances and the 5 faults. They're both mentioned in a similar context, but I don't really know, like, the difference of, like, what they're for.
They're both obstacles to concentration. I mean, both sets are obstacles. And I think there's some overlap. It's not like they're totally different. So, for example, among the 5 faults, one is excitement. And excitement is explained as when your mind gets distracted to an object of desire. So that's very much like sense desire. The first of the 5 hindrances. Okay. I'm thinking of restlessness. Oh, yeah. Sometimes it's called excitement. I think Venerable calls it restlessness. Yeah, so restlessness. And then sinking, another of the 5 words within the 5 faults. Among the 5 hindrances, there's, I don't know how they're translated, sloth and torpor. I was thinking of that animal. Yeah. So sinking is kind of very much connected with that. And so there's some overlap, some differences. And to me, we need to know both lists. We need to learn both of those lists of hindrances, whether they're called hindrances or faults. They happen to us, so we need to learn about them, recognize them in ourselves, learn what the antidotes are, and apply them. And like I mentioned earlier, I don't understand why the 5 hindrances are not explained in the Lamrim texts. That is beyond me, but I think they should be. But it could also be because, I've heard the Dalai Lama say that the Lamrim, like especially he said this with regard to the Lamrim Chenmo, he says it's a practice manual for those who have studied the great treatises. Right, so like in the monasteries, they study these great treatises, Maitreya and Nagarjuna and Chandrakiri and so on. And Vasubandhu, Abhidharmakosha. So there's a huge amount of material in those texts that explain the path to enlightenment, And they've learned all those things. And then now they want to practice. So the Lamrim teaches them how to practice. So the Lamrim isn't really meant. I mean, the ideal audience or the intended audience of the Lamrim isn't really like brand new people who are just starting off and haven't studied those treatises. So there's a lot of things that aren't mentioned in Lamrim texts. Also, the 16 attributes of the Four Noble Truths. Those are really important to know. They're mentioned, they're listed, but no explanation of them. And so I think the Lamrim is like the essential points, but there's more that it's good to know about. And that's why I really appreciate, one of the reasons I really appreciate the Library of Wisdom and Compassion, because it brings in a lot of those other materials that we do need to know, we do need to understand if we really are serious about following the path to enlightenment. Now, a geshe, actually one of my teachers, the teacher when I was doing the master's program, he said he never studied Lamrim, but he can easily understand it, because it really is taking the main points from those great treatises that they study in the monasteries. So he knows all this stuff from studying the great treatises. But this is just putting it together in a kind of step-by-step. Okay, now this is what you do if you really want to follow the path, practice the path to reach enlightenment. So I think the 5 hindrances, they are mentioned in Vasubandhu's Abhidharmakosha. They're probably mentioned in some of the other treatises that they study in the monasteries, or, extra material they study. So they probably know them already. The geshes, those who've been through that program, know the 5 hindrances, know how to deal with them. But if they're serious about practicing samatha, then the explanation doesn't mention those, it mentions the 5 faults. That's the only thing I can understand why they're not mentioned. But I think we definitely need to know them and recognize them and overcome them, learn how to deal with them. Does that help? Only a little bit? Okay. Yeah.
It seems that 3 of them are covered as main afflictions, the primary afflictions, attachment, anger, and deluded doubt. And then in that, what I recall is in the section on developing calm abiding, there is quite a lot about excitement and sinking and lethargy and explaining those in great detail. So they're not coalesced into 5, but they're already there. Plus, I was thinking, I think most of them are in the 51 mental factors.
Mm-hmm. But again, you don't have that explanation in the Lamrim.
No, but
you
people
don't have
who,
mental factors.
No, but people who have studied the great treatises would have already
right,
studied those very thoroughly.
For sure. Yeah.
And another problem for us is if you're even studying just these, the hindrances or the faults, the translation terms are quite varied. So even you're trying to memorize this list and you read another book about it, you have to learn a whole different thing. So it's just an obstacle that we have in dealing with English that's hard to keep track of these.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but in the Theravada tradition, there's a lot of really helpful material. Like Venerable Khadro found this. It was a free ebook from this. It was an American monk. I don't remember his name. It started with a T. American monk who'd spent a lot of time in Thailand, and he wrote a book about the 5 hindrances and how to overcome them. So he shared the link. And then there's this one by Shaila Catherine. She's a woman in California who's done a lot of meditation and seems to have gotten quite far in her practice. And she also wrote a book about the 5 what's the name of that book? Beyond Distraction, I think. Also very helpful. So there's a lot of helpful material from contemporary practitioners explaining these different, like those 5 hindrances and how to work with them. Okay, so one more.
out of curiosity, I looked up the Tibetan for the 5 hindrances in Lamrim Chenmo, and there's a reference in Volume 1 where the English in Lamrim Chenmo is 5 obscurations, but I think it's the same Tibetan term. And it's, Tsongkhapa says, therefore, while sitting or standing, act purposefully, as I have explained before, by completely clearing your mind of the 5 obscurations, hindrances. So it seems like he thinks he's told us how to do this somewhere.
Well, let me look that up, see if I can find it. Or it could have been in another text.
Exactly, because it seems like in the 2 places it shows up, it's Tsongkhapa's quoting Friendly Letter, which gives the list of the 5.
Yeah. Because Lama Tsongkhapa wrote a commentary on the Bodhisattva vows. And maybe in there he explains, since it is mentioned in one of the secondary precepts. So maybe, because Lamrim Chenmo was, I don't know what point in his career it was written, but yeah, maybe it was later than some of his other texts. So he was just telling his disciples, I already told you about this, so remember and practice. Okay, so we'll end there. Share the merit with all living beings.
May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and the spiritual friends who practice it, have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of love song's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Idam Guru Rana Mandalakam Niryatayami. Due to this merit may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore.